All right, so did either one of you guys see this movie before?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Good, good.
Had you? You hadn't, right?
I had not, no. It's been on my list of movies to watch, and I hadn't gotten to it. And I've seen a lot of references to it. A couple of comedians uh, doing impersonations of the diner scene of Pacino and De Niro. It did have a lot of hype to it being a great movie, so it was interesting to finally get it off the list and get it watched.
Well, you say interesting. How did you feel about it?
I thought it was a great movie. Overall, it was really good. The acting was good. The diner scene was iconic, I expected. But I know you guys are gonna tear it apart because you guys don't ever like the same shit I like. I know it's gonna happen.
Okay. This will not be a repeat of Rebel Moon. I'll say that. With this movie,
Mm-hmm.
I would give a lot more credence to taste, where I think I can imagine someone enjoying it, but I will say it's not my cup of tea. I kind of had a feeling that it wouldn't be. I really tried to enjoy it, but these like really slow burn, sort of just like flat dramas oftentimes just bore me.
Hmm.
And that was the number one takeaway for me, was I was just bored. From beginning to end. I never became interested in it. Not even in the climax. Well, there's the midpoint, the heist scene. I was like not even invested in what was going on.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I was generally bored. I would actually chalk up the reason I didn't like this film to the fact that I think it's pretty dated. The whole heist thing, bank robbers, that's not really a popular movie trope anymore. And just like the
This movie's from
archetypes of like,
'95. What'd you expect?
well, things
I
from
mean, this movie's older
'95,
than both of you. This movie's older than both of you guys.
true, but
So I can understand why it wasn't your cup of tea.
well, when I say dated, I think that like movies like this have evolved so much in the past 20 years, 25 years that like something that would come out now would blow this out of the water because they're not going to repeat the same tired, boring tropes. Like I think that Heat sort of paved the way for a lot of things, but since there's been so much release since then, it seems like just dated. It's old. It's boring. I think that so if you take a movie like Reservoir Dogs and Heat, obviously very similar concepts, bank heists gone wrong, but it's weird because Reservoir Dogs is extremely bare bones, but I enjoyed it more. And Heat is extremely detailed and very long, and I couldn't really get into it. I was honestly pretty bored. There was even a point during the film where I was on the weather app seeing if it was going to rain.
I
Well, talk to us
can
a little
understand,
bit, Kevin, about the movie and your impressions of it.
and I can understand the difference why I like it. You guys don't. I grew up in that time where those movies were commonplace. Those actors were commonplace. De Niro and Pacino. Actually, Pacino stars in two of my top five movies all time. So I'm really used to having him in movies in my day. De Niro, the same thing. '70s, '80s, '90s was a big name. Still probably is a still big name. Hasn't done much lately, but um, back in '95 when that came out, this was one of the more hardcore movies. A lot of movies weren't so prone to violence and stuff like that. So this was one of those movies that when it came out was just everybody enjoyed it. Everybody loved it because it was just so action packed and full of shooting and robberies and a lot of running from the cops and stuff like that. And you're right, and things have evolved into new different things. Like what's a good heist movie that came out recently, other than some of those dumbass Fast and Furious movies? The genre's completely changed over the years, which is fine because it's a new generation of movie watchers. But me being old enough to remember these are basically classic. These are basically the movie kind of movies that I grew up on. So I enjoyed it for that because it brought it back a lot of nostalgia.
Well, to be fair, I completely understand what you mean about Pacino and De Niro. De Niro was in one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Taxi Driver, which came out
Oh,
around that same
love that
time
movie.
period.
Yeah.
That is a great film. So I'm not criticizing the actors, and I think that the star-studded cast is one of the only things that I saw as a positive about this film personally. I will say though, I've never seen, or it's been a very long time since I saw Scarface. I don't think Pacino's acting in this film was very good. Like I wasn't convinced by the whole like morally gray cop thing he was going for. Like he would yell, and his obviously his mouth is emitting these loud noises, but there was no emotion in his eyes. I didn't know. I was like, okay, wait, is he like jokingly yelling at these people, or is he actually supposed to be conveying that he's upset and he's screaming at them? So like his cop character, I could never get an emotional read on him for like the entirety of the film. And in the end scene when it leads up to him, I guess we can go ahead and spoil it. We've all seen it. To him eventually killing De Niro, and they kind of hold an embrace of their hands for a second. I was like, wait, Pacino this whole time was like relating to this criminal character and didn't want to actually have to kill him and views him in sort of like a brotherly way. So yeah, Pacino's acting, I couldn't really, like, I was not interpreting what was meant to be interpreted by his emotions and his delivery. I just couldn't understand what I was supposed to be getting out of his delivery.
Yeah. Just to let you know, Taxi Driver was in '76, so that movie's 19 years older than this one.
That's crazy.
Uh,
I like how I said same time period because that's still I would still
yeah,
say same
it
general
came
time
out like
period for me.
came out around the any time before you were born is the same time period.
Exactly. It could have been like
It made me
1858.
giggle. Yeah, it made me giggle that you said that, but that was a good movie too. The thing
I
is,
will say I do agree with that about Pacino. I think a comparison that I would make to a very similar character where I think that it was done more convincingly would be in oh no, Boondock Saints. Um, I it's been a while since I've seen it, but Willem Dafoe's character is sort of a similar. He's like an obsessed detective, right? Trying to stop a specific set of criminals, and his descent into madness. I mean, he kind of starts insane, but I really felt that in that movie and followed it and could sort of see his insanity. And with Al Pacino, yeah, it was just like he was being loud from the beginning, and it felt like that was just how he talked to people. And even as he's like holding his, I'm not sure if it was his half daughter, stepdaughter, who has just killed herself. He's holding her in his arms, and even at that point, he was like totally flat, and I just didn't believe his performance.
that's the thing with Pacino. I think Pacino is that's just who Pacino is because a lot of his roles, he's loud and he's out there. It fits for some roles. I agree. It probably didn't fit for this role because I was watching it, and then he was talking calmly, and then all of a sudden he's yelling, and then he's talking calmly again. Like, what the fuck was that, Al? I don't know what's going on. It works for some of his roles. Like one of my favorite movies is Any Given Sunday, which where he plays the coach of the football team, and his performance in that movie was exceptional, and the yelling was appropriate for the role. It was a little confusing in this role. I still think it was a great role because I mean the dialogue back and forth between the two characters was, in my opinion, exceptional. I know you guys won't agree with that, but that's how I feel. I,
Well,
it, it yeah, it probably is outdated. According to today's standards, it's probably old school and no longer effective form of entertainment. But back when I was young, I didn't see it when I was young, but it did remind me of when I was young and I'd watch movies like that all the time, and that's how it was back in the day.
Kevin, I'm not here to just dump all over this movie. This is one of
Yeah, you are. That's what you do constantly. You shit on my movies.
no,
It's
no, no,
fine.
no, no. This
I
is
know,
this
just
is a,
kidding.
this is a rare occasion where I genuinely feel like I missed something because typically I trust my own intuition, but there's so many overwhelmingly positive reviews of this movie online that talk about how it's a masterfully written cat and mouse game that you have to see, and it's action packed and realistic and the dialogue is amazing. I've never had an experience where what I see and read online about a movie is just the complete opposite of my
Love,
actual
Death, and Robots.
interpretation. Those are fake paid for reviews. But so Kevin, what I'm getting at here is I want you to, in just a few sentences or maybe a couple paragraphs, explain
Yeah,
this
write it down and show it to the camera.
explain this movie to me, how you interpreted it, like what you love about this movie.
Well, watching the movie, you do catch on to some things that are unrealistic. Like when they were doing the heist, apparently the bad guys are the only ones who know how to shoot because the cops missed every fucking shot except for the point blank ones. Al Pacino seems to be the only good guy that was any decent of a shot. I think the excitement was back in '95. This was something new and unique with the action and the bank robbery scene and all the gunshots and just the chaos that ensued because of this heist. Back then you didn't see that kind of stuff on TV, so that's what made it so exciting. This is why people love the movie so much. But now we've been 30 years now of crap movies that people have just become numb to something that's actually decent, which is why I guess people's tastes have changed. But back in '95 when this movie came out, this was the epitome of a great movie. I mean, it sold a lot in the theaters. Uh, it amassed a lot of rentals at Blockbuster. It was one of the highest. I don't want to say awarded because I'm not sure what awards it was, but it was lauded as a great movie. But now, I mean, I look at it now, and because I've got a lot of experience watching other movies that weren't so good, and other movies that were better. It is outdated, but for the time period, it was probably top notch.
See, I appreciate you saying that. I am having sort of an issue though. It's like there's, if somebody asked me to watch something like Nosferatu or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, like one of these like extremely old and objectively very dated films, I would have to watch it through a lens of like, okay, this is how they did it in 1905. This is how they did it in
Yeah, that's what you have
1920.
to do.
But the thing is, it's not like we have to do this for the 90s. Like there's films that are far older than Heat, like the Dirty Harry franchise. I love that. And that also deals with a cop and sort of like this cat and mouse dynamic between Harry and like the criminals. And then also the Death Wish trilogy. Do you guys familiar with those films? Charles Bronson?
Actually, I'm not.
See, like,
I saw the first one. I'm not a big fan of Charles Bronson. I just don't like his delivery. But
But I
I
I do
mean,
think there are plenty of examples of films.
right, right. So that's why I'm saying I'm sort of having this like I don't understand because I'm saying that Heat has these dated elements that are sort of preventing me from fully enjoying it and fully being able to immerse myself in it. But there's films that are older that I think hold up great today. So like I'm really having trouble identifying what the real issue is. If I had to choose something else that I think could be holding me back is like you can tell with the 2 hour and 50-minute runtime, they really wanted to pack realistic sounding dialogue into the film. And I think they thought that realism just meant arbitrary conversations that don't really matter because there's a lot of those in the film. I found myself like struggling to pay attention through these conversations in diners, in just random restaurants, like conversations with these flat girlfriend characters that just are inconsequential. I was like, what are we talking about here? So if this film would have been maybe an hour or so shorter and like cut the dialogue in half, I think I could have been engaged a lot more so than I actually was.
I
I mean,
think one word I would use to describe this movie to to the point of people who like the movie. So I went down some Reddit threads before this video to see sort of what the discussions about Heat were like. And this is one of those movies that people defend very, very strongly. And one of the most common criticisms when someone says they don't like Heat, generally the response is, well, you didn't understand it. You didn't pay attention. You don't have enough of an attention span. And on the one hand, I will grant it's a long movie and it was very difficult for me to pay attention.
mm-hmm.
The thing is, I like many, many, many movies that are long. Okay, the 3 hour plus movies, I could probably generate like 10 that I think are very, very well done. So I don't think it's the length, but here's my concession. It is a complex film. There is a lot going on. There are a lot of storylines, and to the film's credit, all of the storylines tie in some way or another. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that the writers were just like lazy. Absolutely not. They pieced together quite a lot of different relationships, dynamics, and pieced them all together. I mean, it's a complex woven web of a plot. I'll give it that. My issue is with the presentation of that plot. I don't feel I didn't feel connected with any of the characters. I wasn't, how can I put this?
Invested.
Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, I could read like a scientific dissertation on like physics and maybe understand it and say that was very complex and well put together, but that wouldn't make it like emotionally compelling. And so, Kevin, what Will and I kind of would love to hear you do, as someone who did get something out of this film, is sort of just explain like the parts of the film or the characters that sort of like that you connected with, and what about it you connected with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, that's great that you said that. De Niro's character, I mean, he was just hardcore, do the job, no connections, be able to walk away in 30 seconds. Don't have any of those things holding you down. And he was the difference between him and the other characters is the other characters had those lives where they had, significant others, they had family, they had some had kids, and he didn't. And there's the scene where they're all at the restaurant where I think he's coming to realize that that's not a choice that he wants to make anymore. He wants to have that kind of connection, which is why he has the connection with what was her name, Edie?
Edie.
Is it Edie? So the I guess the second part of the movie just focuses on him, improving his relationship with Edie, and ends up being one of the things that brings him down in the end was involving her and you know not being able to. I guess when he was exiting the building, he did walk away, from her. But I think if he hadn't, changed his ways and gotten into the relationship in the first place, he probably would have gotten away, and everything would have gone according to plan. These guys are really well trained, really good at what they do, and then it's the moment they change things up is when it falls apart, which is the central meaning that I got from the whole movie. Emotionally, I mean, there was a lot from both sides. Like Pacino's character, I mean, he was on his, I think, what, third marriage, and he was struggling with that. And then the moment she cheated, he was just like, "All right, I'm done. I'm taking my TV. I'm done." I guess it's just mostly emotionally the interpersonal relationships that we all have with each other, and how it fits into the bigger picture of our lives. It shows the importance of those relationships. I can go to work every day and do my job, and live a great life, make a lot of money, but in the end, I come home and I don't have friends to hang out with. I don't have a significant other to spend my time with. So that does affect me emotionally, and it affected him as a character. His whole emphasis was his job was to chase bad guys and put them away. That was all he was. He wasn't a relationship person. He wasn't good at the marriage thing. I mean, this is, like I said, his third marriage all failed because all he did was chase bad guys. And then De Niro's character, all he did was heists and make money and rob. I mean, you could tell he was successful because look at his house. He had a great house. So his job was just to go and to commit these crimes and make this money and not have anything holding him back. And he was successful at it. But the moment he got into a relationship, everything changed, and it was going to be either the bad guy wins, because he's good, or the guy who's been chasing bad guys all his life and ruining relationships wins. And we all saw how that ended. I kind of wish De Niro's character would have got away because I liked his character a little bit better than Pacino's. But it's basically what I picked from mostly was the interpersonal relationships that we all have, how they affect us daily.
Yeah, that's fair because that is one of the strong points of the film that I saw people talking about online is the various dialogue, the web of all these complex plot points, which are obviously interpersonal relationships. So, yeah, I can understand that. I definitely think I owe this movie another watch. I don't know if I can give this movie another watch ever. I actually kind of came away with like the feeling that I there's no scenario where I will ever watch this again. Not because it sucked, just because like I don't even know if it's biologically possible for me to enjoy this. Like I don't know if my DNA can enjoy this film. But I definitely owe it another watch, so I can at least say that much.
Yeah, I want to basically just completely give grace to this film in the sense of whether or not you should be invested in the plot. I'm going to say my experience is mostly taste. I think I can imagine a scenario where you like this type of film and where you really just like seeing not like necessarily diving into one person's story, but rather seeing a bunch of different stories and how they can interact with each other. I can see that. I will say, speaking of rewatching, I did rewatch the middle bank heist scene in this movie. I watched that scene twice. And one of the major reasons that this movie is so popular and has sort of like a cult following is overused in like film sphere, but like a actual like cult following is because of this scene. For some reason, people have gotten the idea that this movie is like more realistic in terms of its action sequences than almost any other action movie, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that scene is actually used to train police people in some city." That scene was it. I'm sure it was like shown in a police station somewhere as a like, "Oh yeah, look, this is what you're going to be doing as a policeman." There's no way that it's actually training material. That scene is not realistic. It is not like what it's not even well shot. The editing is so jumpy. Like you can't even tell what's going on. They don't actually give you any spatial reference of what's happening. It's like every microsecond it's just panning to some random person getting shot. I'm sorry, terrible action scene, and I will stand on that. That's what you in the comments can hate on me for. Okay, I'll allow you to like the movie as a whole, but you're not allowed to like this. The action in this film is so bad.
No, I stand on that completely. I will die on that hill. I will be murdered on that hill. That scene was so jumpy, it gave me a headache. I felt like I was about to start seizing. There was a cut every like point 0.7 seconds. People were just shooting in random directions. There was no spatial awareness of where anything was. There was just bullets flying everywhere, but not actually hitting anything. I mean, I was just like, I don't know what's happening. I felt like somebody like put me on a merry-go-round and just spun me around as fast as possible, and I was trying to orient myself. It wasn't engaging. It was just loud, obnoxious, flashy, and I could not even tell what was happening. If you're going to do a scene like that, you at least need to add copious amounts of gore, and there was barely any gore. I was like, what is this? It's just loud noises and jump cuts for no reason.
I still don't think they were doing gore back in '95.
I feel like Taxi Driver had better gory fight scenes, and that was 20 years prior.
Dude, the end scene of Taxi Driver was just phenomenal. We need to talk about that film eventually, but obviously not right now. Yeah, Kevin, I really am not saying that this is a bad film. And speaking of that, we need to get into our ratings of the film right now. So I'll just go ahead and give a rating. I want to say that objectively, I could see this film being a 6, 7, or 8. And I didn't personally get that level of enjoyment out of this, but I can understand or at least empathize with the people who feel that way. I really, my rating is sort of like a placeholder until I eventually watch it again. You know, I'll maybe say, I'll say a 5 or 6 for my personal opinion about it. Like it was just kind of boring and bland and kind of hard to get through. I will give it another watch. I'm not saying it's terrible. Um, there were things that I can see how people would love about this film, but yeah, I'll say like a 5 for my first watch, a 5, but with the caveat of I need to watch it again, and it'll probably have a higher rating the second time. Who's next?
Well, I enjoyed this movie, and I'm gonna give it a 7. It wasn't exceptional. Like I said, I more enjoyed it because it was more nostalgic for me because it reminded me of movies back in when I was young and in middle school and high school, and we'd go to the theaters and watch movies like this all the time. A 7 because I agree with you on the length. The length of the movie was just too long. They could have cut it by 30 minutes and still got some the plot through. The heist scene, I know you guys didn't enjoy it, was probably one of my favorite scenes, but then there was parts of it when I was watching like that's not realistic. Like when he's shooting all these bullets and he's standing in the middle of the street and five cops are shooting him and not a single one of them hits him. I'm like, there's no way, dude. But
Dude, shooting
back
the
in
guy
90,
when he's holding the little girl, that was also pretty risque. Although at the same time, I also know that that scene was based on an actual conflict between bank robbers and police, so maybe that actually did happen, but like yeah, that was a little.
yeah, well, my reaction to that was, damn, that was a hell of a good shot. Because you don't see that in the movies that often. I don't know why when they portray bank robbers and heist movies like this, that everybody's a terrible fucking shot.
Yeah. So another reason that I sort of had an issue with this film in general is the deaths were just not even close to realistic, and the scene where the man holding the little girl is shot directly in the head, like his head would have been in half. There would have been a fountain of blood, but there's just like a tiny hole, if that, and he just falls down. Also, when people get shot, they don't like have a standing convulsion and then fall to the ground. Like the actual shooting deaths do not look like anything that happened in this film. Like you can't a bullet when it goes through you, especially like seven bullets, are bound to hit bundles of nerves or your spinal cord, and you're going to immediately drop to the ground and like lose control of your legs and just instantly be dead in some cases. But they do the thing where they're like they can stand and take like four bullets and then they I don't know. Just the deaths were not realistic, and also there was no gore. There wasn't even realistic gore. I'm not talking about like buckets of blood for no reason. Like we're talking about people who are getting shot directly in the heart, directly in the head, directly in the face.
With high powered rifles.
Exactly, and there's just
Don't forget that
nothing.
part,
There's
yeah.
just no blood. I'm like, what is like? What are these people made out of?
Yeah.
Styrofoam?
Yeah. That was
Well, I will
that's probably a
say,
that's probably a 1995 thing where gore wasn't allowed on in theaters yet.
Dude,
Because
well, probably, but Reservoir Dogs had buckets of gore. Like
yeah, but
there's a character who's
Tarantino, that's what made Tarantino famous was that he was willing to go beyond what was accepted. I mean, when Reservoir Dogs came out, there was a lot of controversy with that movie because of the gore, because of the violence. Because it's not normal. Now it's normal because we see it all the time, but back then it wasn't, and that's why Heat was such a popular movie too because you don't see that kind of violence on it. But here we are 30 years later, we're looking at it and all the movies we've seen better. Yes, I agree. I have seen better than this movie. But for 95, for the time when I was 12 years old, this was probably one of the best movies that was out.
you watched this when you were 12, man. That's crazy.
I did not. I didn't. I just saw it for the first time as an adult.
Oh
But
yeah.
I watched movies like this when I was 12. This is the nostalgia part for it because this is where the movie industry was, morphing into. It changes as we go on. I mean, you guys look now, the movies that come out now, you would not have seen 30, 40 years ago, because the technology wasn't there. The acceptance of, certain things, like I remember back when I was a kid, you would never hear the word shit on TV or in the movies. And now it's commonplace to hear all those words, and it's how we have evolved. Our movie tastes have evolved over the time, the period of time, that it yeah, it is outdated because it's not
I
what
think
we're used to now, and I understand that, guys.
I think to some extent what you're talking about may be more a result of what you were allowed to watch at those ages, because I know for a fact that there is a lot of movies in the 70s and 80s and definitely by the 90s that were extremely vulgar and extremely gory. They may not have been the most popular, blockbuster films, but they were definitely in theaters yeah.
Well, yeah, because you had movies like Porky's back in the 70s, which were the whole plot of the movie was high school kids trying to have sex, and there was nudity and all kinds of stuff. And so yeah, I mean, it was there, but it wasn't a mainstream thing. Like these were a lot of movies like that were direct to video. They were not released in theaters because those movies didn't sell back then.
Oh, I didn't give my rating. I would probably rate this film 5.5. That's my gut.
That's fair.
I'm giving it that because I do think that there are like the bare basics of filmmaking are present. They did create a score. I don't think it's good. I don't know why people say the score is good, but it's there. The cinematography is like it does the job. I don't think it's great, but it does the job. There is certainly a complex plot, and the writers were not lazy. I don't particularly like their writing style, but they were not lazy. My personal enjoyment was like a two.
Yeah.
I was just really really bored. Um, but I would give it a 5.5.
And I agree. The scene the heist scene was very choppy, very bouncy. It felt like you were just rocking back and forth as it was going on because it was all over the place. But like I said, back in the 90s when, movies came out, that was the norm. That was the cinematography back then. And that's what they got away with. And as we grow older, our tastes change and our preferences change and I don't know. Maybe as a kid I would have loved this movie, gave it like a 9 or a 10 because it was so awesome, but now as an adult and now that we're doing this, you know, as part of our show, I look at it and I tear it apart a little bit more, and I agree with most of the stuff you got. But I still enjoyed the movie. It was a good movie. It had a good plot line. It was drawn out plot line. I mean, it felt like it took forever to get to certain plot points, but overall the story in general was good. It just felt drug out.
One scene in the film that I do just want to straight up pick apart because it was just ridiculous to me is the scene where De Niro is like exchanging that package with the man in the white truck, and then a dude sneaks up between the vehicles, and Val Kilmer, who's on the roof with a literal scoped sniper rifle, warns De Niro that that guy's behind him. He's like, "There's a guy," and there's like this weird scene where Val Kilmer picks up his scoped sniper rifle and starts doing barrel rolls and shooting at the truck. And there's like a one-legged dude who has just gotten crushed between the cars, who's like shooting a literal Uzi through the window of De Niro's vehicle, and it just doesn't do anything. And then he gets like smacked by the car. I don't even feel like actually breaking down that scene chronologically, like piece by piece. I think what I just described is just enough insanity. I can tell people in the 90s were probably like, whoa, he had the sniper in his hands and he just did a front flip and then shot. But like, dude, these days that is not gonna fly. That scene was like a comedy movie. I was like, what is happening here? This is like
I
Mission
forgot about that scene.
Impossible, bro. Like, I don't even know what is even going on. Yeah, that's it. That scene was ridiculous to me. I'm sorry. So that's the one like overwhelmingly negative thing I'll say. I don't even know what was happening during that scene. That was bad.
I didn't like Val Kilmer's character.
Dude, he was this quiet, brooding, just like self-centered, loose cannon. Yeah, he was. Did he even smile one time in the entire
I
movie?
don't know. He looked like a drunk, divorced Brad Pitt
I know. He looked like he was
because
wearing a wig.
I had to double take for a second because I thought it was Brad Pitt at first. I was like, oh no, that's Val Kilmer.